what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through how I'm going to do this clinic. So what I thought was I'm going to divide it into certain parts. So the first part is I'm just going to talk about the guitar and the various kinds of guitars that are there. All right, there's going to be a PDF that's going to follow with this, which I'm going to send to Janvi and she's going to share with you. All right, and the PDF has got all the everything that I'm going to talk about. Okay, so I'm going to first talk about the guitars, then I'm going to talk about all the things that affect the sound of the guitar, right? And then eventually I'm going to talk about recording. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to assume that you said yes, because the thing with Zoom is that you end up being Dora the Explorer. You say something and then you wait for people to say something back when they don't. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, this is the guitar. It has not always looked like this. Historically, the guitar has its history in the lute. Has anybody heard of the lute? The lute was like an
No.
instrument that was around during the Renaissance, and
Okay.
music was generally written for it, and it had like a really thick neck and up to 32 strings and all. But lute also has its history in like Eastern European instruments like saz and other Turkish instruments. It surprisingly, like Indian mythology mentions the veena, which is again a stringed instrument, much before like the saz came into the scene. Like Veena has been mentioned in like the Samved and the Rig Veda, right? And that literature was written in somewhere around 10,000 BC. So it's a pretty old instrument, right? But guitar in its modern form can be attributed to somewhere around, say, the 1600s or 1700s, right? But the modern form of the guitar can be credited to this guy called Andre Segovia. All right. So basically, till the time Segovia came along, guitar was not considered a serious instrument. So, you know what I mean when I say a serious instrument? You couldn't play Bach on it. You couldn't play Mozart on it, right? And this dude Segovia came along and he was like, "Okay, you want to play Bach? There," and he played Bach. He's like, "You want to play you want to play Mozart?" He played Mozart. So he theorized all the possible techniques for modern classical guitar back in the 1700s and the 1800s. Right, I think that guy was born around the late 1800s and died somewhere in the 1900s. But yeah, so the way the guitar used to exist back then was a nylon, like not exactly a nylon string, but a classical guitar which had a smaller body. All right, and the strings were made out of guts, like intestines of cats, and that's true. So if today, like even today, like every time I'm playing my guitar, my cat looks at the guitar and goes like, "Arr," because like they've got like that internal instinct about the strings being made out of their grandfather's guts, and it is true because cats were like the perfect size, the intestines. Um, Cellos used like sheeps, and violins used, I think, yeah, I mean, violins, I'm not sure, but yeah, cellos did use sheep guts. So yeah, that's what strings were initially made of, right? Bodies were much smaller. And I'm just going to show you what a classical guitar looks like. I'm sure most of you have seen it. So this is what a classical guitar looks like, right? So it's got a smaller body compared to a traditional acoustic, and mostly modern classical guitars have nylon strings. So these are not cat intestines, so don't worry about that. No animals were harmed for this. But anyway, so yeah, this was the initial, like like this is what the oldest form of guitars used to look like and sound like as well. So you take like all the classical pieces, that's what the soundscape was, right? And they were constructed in a way where it was like a mini orchestra, in the sense that it was an entire string section. You had your basses, you had your cellos, you had your violas, and you had your violins, right? So therefore, it was an instrument in itself, but at the same time, it was also like an orchestra in itself, right? Classical guitar was played in a way where everything was arranged for it. So you had your bass movement happening, you had a melody happening, right? You had harmony happening. So, but yeah, excuse my subpar playing. It's like 5 a.m. here, but that's basically how classical guitar was supposed to sound like. All right, so that was the beginning of the guitar. Eventually, there were problems that people came across. So, of course, one of the problems was that it was not only played for classical music. You had other styles of music like flamenco and other traditional folk music that was using classical guitars. And flamenco is a music from Spain, right? And it's very dynamic and it's got a style of dancing associated to it. So the style was very dynamic. People were like really picking hard, right? So that was not a problem. But like when this instrument reached the United States, right? And if you guys know anything about the United States, it's brash, it's loud, and it's in your face, right? And something like this, which is nice, small, and mellow, does not work there. They want it big. All right. So the kind of music that was happening in the United States was varied, right? There was blues that was happening in the African American community, and there was also like these white folk that were playing their own music, which was divided into two parts. One was country music, right? The other was Americana or roots, which is bluegrass music. And bluegrass music usually featured an instrument like the banjo, the fiddle, right, and like a bass. And these instruments were like very loud because I mean, if you've heard a banjo, it can get very loud, and if you've heard like a fiddle, that gets very loud as well. So they had to get an alternative to this, right? And one of the alternative was to make the body bigger, right? Okay, Manan can't hear me. Uh, what about everybody else? Am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah, you
Yes,
are.
you're audible.
Just check with Manan if there's a.
Okay. All right. Manan,
I'll
try
just
and
check
figure
with
something
Manan
out.
what's the problem.
Like put me through a Bluetooth speaker and blast me like on full or something till your parents are pissed with you. Okay. Anyway, coming back to what was happening. Where was I? Yeah, so they wanted an instrument that was loud, right? So they got a bigger body and they substituted the nylon strings and they brought in steel strings. And suddenly you had like this really loud sounding guitar, right? And let me just show you what a steel string guitar looks like. This is what a traditional steel string guitar looks like. It's much bigger, right? And you see the neck is also wider and see the head is kind of different. This is actually a 12 string guitar. This was made somewhere in the 1950s by this luthier in Florida. I just got a hold of it. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely louder than, right? So right, so that's like definitely louder and also richer than the nylon string guitar, right? So that's the history of the guitar, like the modern guitar. I'm going to get to electric guitars, but I just wanted to talk about the mechanics of how these guitars work, right? So it's pretty simple. You set the string in motion by picking at it. Now the string vibrates. It causes like some sort of resonance on the neck, which transfers to the body, goes into the sound hole, and comes out of that. And now that's the basis of every acoustic guitar that you're going to find in some way or the other. Right. Now, before I get into electric guitars, that was important to know because that's how you're going to get your sound. And when we're going to record, we're going to keep in mind how the sound propagates, right? Um, Now, what happened after like the 1920s? Does anybody know what happened to music in the United States after the 1920s? So yeah, after the 1920s, music turned into like big band music, right? There were horns everywhere. Jazz was a thing. You know, cities like New Orleans, they had like these marching bands, right? And that became the popular music. Chicago had like big band and horns, and like blues was really coming along as a style. And if you guys know anything about playing with horns, it was loud. Okay, the horns are very loud, and you need something that kind of amplifies this, right? And to make it louder, even louder, they attached some sort of a microphone to it,